What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Primetime Sports Podcast, hosted by Joey Malari. So in this episode, it's going to be a big breakdown of the NBA draft, which is tonight. We have the first round of the NBA draft starting at 8 o'clock, and then round 2 will be tomorrow at 4 p.m. Both days will be broadcasted through ESPN, and it will be hosted at the Barclays Center, the home of the Brooklyn Nets. So lots happened with the Brooklyn Nets over the last 12, 14, 16 hours or so. I'm going to give my thoughts on the trade that just went down there between the Nets and the Knicks, and then also the Nets and the Houston Rockets made a trade as well. I'll talk about both of those, but I'm going to wait until the end to do that. So the beginning of this episode is going to be a big breakdown of the first round of the NBA draft. Going to give a 1 through 30 mock first round for tonight's draft. We'll start off with Atlanta. They have the first overall pick. I have them taking Zachary Risacher, a small forward that's 6'9" out of France. France has been balling in the NBA draft over the last few years. We saw Victor Wembanyama go first overall last year. We saw Bilal Coulibaly go top 10 last year. And now if you look at this year's draft, you have Risacher and probably Sarr going 1 and 2 overall. So France has done very well for themselves the last couple of years in the NBA draft. When I watch Risacher play, I see some Michael Porter Jr. in his game. He's good in catch-and-shoot situations from 3. Solid size like Michael Porter Jr. as well. Both of them around 6'9" or 6'10". Risacher plays with a lot of firepower on defense. It does get him into some foul trouble, though. If he's a small ball 4, I don't really love that fit as much as I do with him being more of a 3. I don't think a 4 really is the best idea. I think having him as the 3 is probably best where he belongs in the NBA. So I have him going number 1. Then I have Alex Sarr going second overall, a 7-foot power forward / center from France, going to the Washington Wizards. Sarr has chosen to not work out for Atlanta at all and likely will end up being the number 2 pick as a result. When watching him play, he has similar attributes to Siakam, Giannis, and Evan Mobley. High praise, and I know some player comps nowadays are really crazy, especially in the NFL draft. Everybody's getting comparisons to Hall of Famers, but I do think Sarr could be a legitimate star right away in the NBA. Plays very well in transition, gets downhill easily on offense, and he can also jump with anyone. A 7'5" wingspan definitely helps, which is where I get the Giannis take, because he can jump very well like Giannis. But in regards to Siakam, they both space the floor very well and can shoot. As for defense, Sarr is going to disrupt passing lanes and can move very well. Very good rim protector. Defensive upside is there, which is why I think Mobley is a solid comp as well. I think he has the highest upside in the draft, especially if he can develop the 3 even more to adapt to today's NBA. Especially with big men needing to stretch the floor nowadays. If he can develop that shot even more, that's obviously key. At number 3, the Houston Rockets, I have taken Dalton Knecht, a 6'6" shooting guard / small forward out of Tennessee. He's 23 years old, but I do like Knecht a lot. I think he's being underrated right now. I think he can step in and be a big contributor from 3 right away. He shot 38% from 3 in his college career. He can create his own shot. He's underrated at getting to the bucket and can drive down the lane a little bit as well. I think he can be like Tyler Hero, but honestly even better to some degree. Can be a knockdown shooter off the catch. He's solid in mid-range jumpers as well. Creates his own shot often and is good in the pick and roll. His ceiling is high. As a prospect, I think he's a top 3 talent in the draft. I know it's pretty crazy. People probably don't have him that high, but I do think he's capable of being a top 3 player in this draft in the NBA. He averaged 21.7 points per game last year. And even with defense being his biggest issue, which he does need to get better, going laterally side to side, he does have the offensive production that can step in to a lineup right away and make a difference. I see some Luka in his game a little bit as well. I'm not saying he's Luka Doncic. I'm not saying he's any of these guys that I'm comparing guys to. I'm just saying when you watch their game, they have similar abilities against the competition they played against. So Knecht, the guys he played against in the SEC, he played a game similar to Luka where he could shoot at all 3 levels, create his own shot, and shoot the 3 ball very well. Next up at number 4, I have San Antonio taking Rob Dillingham, a 6'1" point guard out of Kentucky. Another favorite player of mine in the draft, an electric scorer off the bench this past year for Kentucky. 15 points per game and around 23 minutes per match. Kid can get absolute buckets. He's only 19 years old. San Antonio does need a point guard to pair up with Wembanyama, which I think they will address here at the number 4 pick. When I watch him play, I see a mix of Bones Highland and John Morant on film. Both are shifty guards that can get buckets. Dillingham has bounce like John Morant, can get up and slam it. When watching some of his plays with driving down the lane with force, I honestly saw some John Wall and Kyrie athleticism in his game, can move around defenders in crafty ways in the air. Nobody has Kyrie's athleticism or his finishing ability in the air, so I'm not saying he's Kyrie, but he can definitely score at all 3 levels. Kyrie's athleticism in the air to be able to get around guys is just miraculous. As for Dillingham, I think he can score at all three levels in the NBA. He became a better playmaker and could be a pick-and-roll threat with Wemby. That's a game he's starting to develop more as well. Height and weight are definitely a worry. He's only 164 pounds, but he did average 2.4 steals per game at Kentucky. A lot of that had to do with speed, but his defense will need to be better in the NBA. At number 5, I have the Detroit Pistons taking Reed Sheppard, a 6'2" shooting guard out of Kentucky. He averaged 12.5 points per game, a 52% shooting from three this past season as a freshman. He can shoot off the dribble and shoot off the catch, which is something Detroit can use both of. They need help shooting. I'm higher on Connect than I am Sheppard. Sheppard is a little bit better on the defensive end, 3.2 steals and blocks per game, which short for steals and blocks per game is stocks. He had 3.2 stocks per game this past season, forced a lot of turnovers, which is something that doesn't get highlighted enough. I have him going 5th overall to Detroit, who I think is creating a nice core there with Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, and Cade Cunningham. Now moving on to number 6, I have Donovan Clingan going 6th overall to the Charlotte Hornets, a 7'1" center out of UConn. He's a 2-time national champion. His 7'7" wingspan makes it really hard to score on him. His defensive upside is definitely there. He could still use a little bit more consistency and a little bit more work on the offensive end. Wouldn't be surprised to see him go higher, though. Was a very successful player in college, and Charlotte definitely could use help in the paint. At number 7, the Portland Trail Blazers, I have taken Tidjane Salaün, a 6'9" power forward from France. He averaged 14.2 points per game in France's Pro A League this past year. Still under 19 years old, a 7'2" wingspan, has excellent recovery speed in the paint. Whenever someone cuts back door, it seems like he always recovers on film. A raw prospect that will get better on both ends. I see some Kevin Durant in his game as well on the offensive end. I think he has what it takes to be a major contributor in the future in the NBA. He is young as well, so he does have a lot of room to grow. Portland needs help all around. They could take a guy that is a little bit more of a project like Salaün. I think that's what they end up doing here with the 7th overall pick. At number 8, we have the San Antonio Spurs picking yet again, and I have them taking Cody Williams, a 6'7" shooting guard out of Colorado. Honestly, it's hard to get the best feel for his game since he did miss some games due to injury this past season, but he did average 12 points per game, a 43% shooting from three, which is a solid freshman year. Versatile on defense, very good on offense in transition, has some solid finishing touches at the rim as well. He finds ways to get to the bucket consistently, which you need to do at the next level, and he has found a way to do that at the college level. Would not be surprised to see San Antonio take him here at number 8. At number 9, I have the Memphis Grizzlies taking Jacoby Walter, a 6'4" shooting guard out of Baylor. He could score at all three levels, and his 3-and-D ability is definitely something that would translate at the next level. He could shoot the three and play defense well, which I think every team in the NBA could still use depth there. No matter which team you are, every team could use another 3-and-D piece. He gets absolute buckets on film, very quick shot release, would be a very good piece next to John Morant. Walter could make Desmond Bane movable to some degree, which I think is going to happen at some point. I think Memphis moves off from him, whether it's now, later in the offseason, or during the season next year. Walter could end up making Bane a little bit more movable. As for Walter on defense, he does have defensive upside, jumps the passing lanes well, recovers well when offensive players get behind him, plays very smooth on the offensive end. I'm a big fan of his game. At number 10, I have Utah taking Nikola Topic, a 6'5" point guard from Serbia. He's not a consistent shooter, which is a worry. That's a big negative in his game, but he's a very strong ball handler. He's only 18 years old. Utah needs a point guard, which it seems like they're going to target that position at number 10. He did just suffer a partially torn ACL recently over the last few months, so that is somewhat of a worry, but he should be ready for this upcoming season. My player comp for him is probably Goran Dragic, and I would not be surprised to see the Utah Jazz take him at number 10. I do think they take a point guard at the number 10 overall selection. Then at number 11, I have the Chicago Bulls taking Stephon Castle, a 6'6" point guard from UConn. Very solid defender at the point of attack. His length and size are upsides for sure. Versatility to cover the 1 through 3 on defense as well. The talent is definitely there. He was very consistent for UConn this past season. He does need to shoot the three ball a little bit better. I think that's something he could develop more in the NBA. I do think Chicago moves on from Lonzo Ball at some point, which would open up the way for them to go out and try to get a point guard. I know they just traded for Josh Giddey, but I don't think that really stops them from going out and getting a legitimate point guard at the number 11 overall selection. If they get rid of Lonzo Ball, that opens up a need at point guard yet again. Originally, I had Castle going 16th overall, but I switched him in Buzelis, so Buzelis will be going 16th, and I have Castle going 11th to Chicago. Next up, at number 12, we have Oklahoma City taking Ron Holland, a 6'7" small forward from the G League Ignite team. He averaged 20 points and 7 rebounds this past season. Only shot 24% from three, so that's definitely part of his game he has to work on. Very skilled at finishing at the rim, though. Excellent in transition on offense and defense, so he's very good on both ends, getting back and obviously pushing the ball with pace. I see some Paul George in his game. He does need a little bit more work with his footwork, though. OKC seems to always find a way to find gems. Sam Presti's great at doing that, so I'm sure they'll do that at number 12. At number 13, I have the Sacramento Kings taking Tristan Da Silva, a 6'8" small forward from Colorado. He can be a contributor right away, which is what the Kings are looking for. He shot 40% from three this past season, can be a 3-and-D player at the NBA level. His defense is excellent on film, but I don't know if he can really work as the 4 or the 5 in a small ball lineup. I think he fits more as a number 3. Harrison Barnes only has 2 years left on his deal at around $18 million per year. I think they could move him this offseason, considering he only has 2 years left at $18 million. It's a pretty good bargain for a starter in the NBA in today's game. I think Da Silva could be a guy that go out and try to replace him. At number 14, we have the Portland Trail Blazers taking Kyle Filipowski, a 6'11" power forward from Duke. Can definitely space the floor due to his ability to shoot the ball from three. 35% shooting from three this past season at Duke. I see some Al Horford and LaMarcus Aldridge in his game. I have seen him falling all the way to 25 and 30 in some mock drafts, but I think he still goes top 20. 14 is a little bit of a stretch, but I made this mock draft probably 3 or 4 days ago and didn't really want to change it, so I'm going to roll with him staying at number 14 overall. And if Portland does go out and draft him at 14, I think they go out and try to trade Jeremy Grant, and maybe he ends up being the starting power forward there if Grant ends up leaving. At number 15, we have the Miami Heat taking Carlton Carrington, or known as Bub Carrington, a 6'4" point guard from Pittsburgh. He's my favorite prospect in this year's draft, a guy who I think is a future NBA All-Star. Bub Carrington is a talented combo guard who can shoot the ball from three. He shot lights out against BC at Conti Forum this past year, and I even met him after the game. He was a really nice kid who I think will be a star in the NBA. 86% of his field goals made this past season were jump shots. He can create his own shot well, which you need to do at the next level. He averaged 14 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists this past season. I think he's the second youngest player in this year's draft, if I remember right, so obviously there's a lot of upside there. He was 10 for 18 from the field in the game against BC, 7 for 12 from 3, and had 27 points against the Eagles. He's shown a lot of playmaking on film with some skilled passes. That's something he definitely worked on this season. I see some Jaylen Brown in his jump shot ability, but he definitely doesn't have the athleticism Jaylen Brown does. I'd like to see him drive a little bit more down the lane and get more buckets in the paint. He's shown an ability to hit some really difficult jump shots, which I see some Norman Powell in some of those shots that I've watched on film. He had a 13% turnover percentage, which is excellent. So obviously shows he handles the ball very well. And for a young kid, there's definitely a lot of upside there. As I said, he's my favorite prospect in this year's draft. And I think the most underrated player, considering I see mock drafts have him going 18-20. I think he's a top 10 talent and top 10 player in this year's draft. He's my favorite prospect in this year's draft. And I think he's a future All-Star. And there's not many guys in every single draft you could say is going to be a future All-Star. But I do think this kid has what it takes to be one. Now moving on to number 16 overall. The Philadelphia 76ers taking Matas Buzelis, a 6'9" small forward from the G League Ignite team. He averaged 14 points per game and 7 rebounds per game this past season, 27% from three, 68% from the free throw line. He does always contest at the rim. Even without the most height, he does get up and contest. He doesn't score well in isolation. He's not a great shooter. He definitely has to work on some of those things, but he does have upside as a prospect. At number 17 of the Los Angeles Lakers taking Jared McCain, a 6'2" point guard from Duke. He helps space the floor very well, especially in his film at Duke. Averaged 14 points per game and 41% shooting from three. This kid can get buckets. I do think the Lakers move on from D'Angelo Russell, so I think they're going to go out and try to replace him and get a point guard. I think McCain could be that guy that steps in and helps them out right away. He averaged 42% shooting from three this year off catch-and-shoot threes, which was in the 91st percentile in college basketball. That's something the Lakers definitely need more help in around LeBron. They need more shooters around him. At number 18, I have the Orlando Magic taking Devin Carter, a 6'2" point guard from Providence. He averaged 20 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists this past year for the Friars, 38% shooting from three. He improved his three-point shooting numbers and his point-per-game numbers in each of his 3 years in college basketball. I think it fit well in Miami, which I would have Miami taking him at 15 if I didn't have Carlton Carrington going there. So I have Orlando taking him at 18, but he's a two-way guard who plays with a lot of hustle and a lot of heart. His defense is very good. He recovers very well, something that I think will transition very well to the next level. I see some Derek White in his game when I watch him on film. That would probably be my best-case scenario for him as a player comparison. He can rebound very well, too. So I have him going 18 overall to Orlando. They do need help scoring the ball, and he could definitely help them shooting the ball as well. At number 19, I have Toronto taking Isaiah Collier, a 6'3" point guard from USC. He averaged 16 points per game of 34% shooting from three as a freshman. He could be the steal of the draft if he falls out of the lottery. His ability to get to the rim is like Anthony Edwards to some degree. He's a player who has a similar play style to Anthony Edwards, which, once again, I'm not saying he's Anthony Edwards, but I do think he gets to the rim on his film in college. He got to the rim with pretty much a lot of ease, just like Anthony Edwards in his film in college. Maybe some Terry Rozier is mixed into his game as well. He's not the most consistent shooter from three. He's probably a few years away from being a big contributor in the NBA. I think he could get some minutes off the bench right now as a rookie, but I do think he can get better with time. And like I've already noted with a lot of these player comps, I'm not saying these guys are these players. It's just when you watch them on film, what are they like, best case scenario in the NBA? And those are very difficult to predict. A lot of the time you're going to be wrong, but you still got to give some player comps to each player just for the sake of it. So I might be wrong with a lot of these, might be way off, but we'll see how things work out. At number 20 for the Cleveland Cavaliers, I'm taking Terrence Shannon Jr., a 6'6" shooting guard from Illinois. He averaged 23 points per game off 36% shooting from three as a fifth-year senior this past season. He's not a good defender, which stands out on film. His player ceiling would be Donovan Mitchell on the offensive end because of his burst, his athleticism, and his speed, also his ability to get buckets. But Donovan Mitchell, that would be asking a lot of Terrence Shannon Jr. to try to live up to that hype. Not saying he's Donovan Mitchell, but he does have some plays where it's like, oh, wow, he gets up like Donovan Mitchell with his speed and his athleticism. But at the end of the day, him falling to 20th overall would be a good value pick for Cleveland. At number 21, I have Khalil Ware, a 6'11" center from Indiana going to the New Orleans Pelicans. He averaged 16 points and 10 rebounds with 2 blocks per game as a sophomore this past season. He shot 43% from three off around 1.5 attempts per game. Very good rim protector. He can space the floor very well on offense with the ability to shoot from three. So he's a good 3-and-D big man. I know my friend ClipK74 is a big fan of his, so I took some time to watch his film, and I think he's going to be a very good value pick somewhere in the 20s. At number 22, I have the Phoenix Suns taking Zach Edey, a 7'3" center from Purdue. He has a 7'11" wingspan, a 9'7" standing reach, ridiculous measurables. I do think he's an NBA player. I think he can be a contributor off the bench somewhere. He was a force in college in the post, was National Player of the Year 2 years in a row. Because of how well he played in the post, he averaged 14.3 points per game in the post this past season. He cannot shoot the ball at all, though, which definitely hurts his ability to space the floor. So he's kind of like Rudy Gobert a little bit on film. At number 23, I have the Milwaukee Bucks taking Baylor Scheierman, a 6'6" shooting guard from Creighton, a very productive scorer in college. 18.5 points per game this past season, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, 38% shooting from three off 8 attempts per game this past year. He can be a good shooter off the bench in the NBA. Also a solid rebounder as well. He can space the floor in offense and can score off the ball. He could be lethal with the drive and kick out in the NBA. The Bucks are in win now mode. They need to go out with guys that can contribute right away and contribute immediately, and Scheierman could be that answer for them. At number 24, I have the New York Knicks taking Yves Missi, a 6'11" center from Baylor who grew up in Cameroon. I think he's going to be Isaiah Hartenstein's replacement. He has a 9'1" standing reach, 6'11" for a height, and a 7'6" wingspan. He averaged 9.5 points per game, 6.1 rebounds, and 1.6 blocks per game for Baylor this past year. He's a great lob threat, a very good rim protector, can be a good pick-and-roll player in the NBA. I see some Mark Williams in his game and some Bismack Biyombo. I think he could be a good pick there for the Knicks at 24. At number 25, I have the Knicks taking Johnny Furphy, a 6'8" shooting guard from Kansas who averaged 9 points per game of 25% shooting from three this past season. He's very young. He was only a freshman. I think he probably should have went back for another year. He does have good size, and obviously being young, he does have a lot that he can build upon, but the Knicks are starting to build their bench, so they need some guys that can contribute right now and then guys that they can use as a project. I think they take him at 25 and maybe use him as a project. At number 26, the Washington Wizards are taking Tyler Kolek in my mock draft, a 6'1" point guard from Marquette. Excellent court vision, can pass the ball on a dime, can shoot the three as well, 39% from deep this past season, 15 points per game, 8 assists, over 7.5 assists per game in each of his last 2 seasons. He's a very talented point guard, and Washington's looking for a guy that can lead that offense. So I have him going at 26 overall. At number 27, I have the Minnesota Timberwolves taking Tyler Smith, a 6'11" small forward from the G League Ignite. He averaged 14 points and 5 rebounds this past season in 22 minutes per game. Could shoot the three very well. That's something Minnesota could use alongside Anthony Edwards is some more shooters. He's only 19 years old. It could be a 3-and-D piece maybe for them, and that's something that they're always looking for, which they do need help shooting the ball, which I think that's what they're going to address in the offseason. Maybe Tyler Smith is that guy they go out and get. They obviously have a lot of size in that lineup already with Karl-Anthony Towns, Jaden McDaniels, and Rudy Gobert. Maybe they end up moving on from one of those guys. Maybe they trade Karl-Anthony Towns and surprise people. I don't think that's going to happen necessarily, but I wouldn't be surprised if they at least look around and see what they could get for some of their big men. At number 28, the Denver Nuggets taking Kevin McCullough Jr., a 6'6" small forward from Kansas. He averaged 18 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists this past season. He's an excellent scorer that could be the 7th or 8th guy in the rotation for Denver. They need more depth off the bench. That was definitely a worry for them this season. Losing Bruce Brown and losing Jeff Green, they need to add to that bench this offseason, and I think getting McCullough Jr. could be a smart pick for them. He played 5 years in college, so I think he can contribute right now with all the experience he has. At number 29, I have the Utah Jazz taking Pacome Dadier, a 6'8" shooting guard from France. He's only 18 years old, has a lot of room to grow, a lot of potential to build upon. Utah is rebuilding, so I think going out and getting a project would work for them. They loved what they did in last year's draft, and I was a big fan of their picks as well, taking Keontae George, Bryce Sensabaugh, and Taylor Hendricks. I think Dadier would be a good pick for them. He can score at all 3 levels. He could use more consistency, but he has the ability to score at all 3 levels, especially on film. His defense has gotten better, but it's still not NBA ready. Has good size at 6'8" for a shooting guard. In the Euro Cup tournament, he averaged 16 points per game this past year. And then at number 30 overall, to round out the first round, I have the Boston Celtics, the reigning NBA champions, taking Keyshawn George, a 6'7" shooting guard from Miami. The Celtics could definitely use a depth piece on a big man here at this pick, maybe take a center or a power forward, but I opted for them to take a shooter off the bench with this pick. George could have stayed another year in college. I think it probably would have been the best decision for him. He only averaged 7.5 points per game and 41% shooting from 3 this past season. He can't shoot the 3 very well, which can help space the floor, but he needs to find more consistency on defense. I think if you look at where they stand right now, the Celtics, they don't really have many holes. They're just going to keep the team together for the most part this offseason and maybe just try to fill in and add another depth piece or two, like a shooter and a big man off the bench. I think that's what they're going to do with that 30th overall selection, is address one of those 2 needs. So now I'm going to move on and talk about some other storylines across the NBA. But before doing so, I'm going to talk about Bronny James. He's definitely a player that's being talked about a lot, and obviously being LeBron James' son, eyes have been on him for years. When I watch Bronny play, I see some good athleticism for sure, really good athleticism, but he's only 6'1" or 6'2", and a player who can get to the bucket at times using speed, but sometimes he finishes recklessly at the rim and just throws it off the side of the rim when trying to finish at the bucket. He needs to work on his touch a little bit on jumpers and layups, but I did like what I saw in some of his plays on film getting to the bucket. I would have stayed at USC for another year if I were him, but that's his decision at the end of the day, and I respect his decision to leave now, but I think if he stayed another year, he would have been a first-round pick maybe next season. The reality is, though, is he's probably going to be the 11th or 12th player, so the last player or the second to last player on the NBA bench. As of right now, that's at least where he's projected in my eyes. He's probably going to be maybe a 2-way G League player right now to start, but at the end of the day, I do see an NBA player when I watch him play. He does need to work on a shot, just 20% on catch-and-shoot threes, but I do think maybe going to the G League could help him out a little bit. As of right now, I have him falling all the way to Indiana at 49th. That's where I project him to go. Bronny only shot 23% of his shot attempts at the rim this season, which is a worry considering he wasn't really shooting that very well in college, couldn't shoot the 3-ball very well, and obviously wasn't really relying on driving down the lane and getting to the free throw line too much, especially if he only shot 23% of his shot attempts at the rim this past season. I do think he has to work on his touch at the rim, maybe try to work on a little bit more finesse, finishing off the backboard, but I did like some of the plays I saw on film. I do see an NBA player when I watch him play. Obviously, it's really hard to live up to the LeBron James legacy, but I do think he has what it takes to be a depth piece in the NBA. There's some very underrated prospects that I want to mention. One of them being Ulrich Chomchi, a 6'10" power forward from Cameroon, a 7'4" wingspan. My buddy Clip K74 is a big fan of his, so yet again, another guy that I watched a lot of film on. I think his ceiling is a little bit low, but he does have the ability to maybe be a draft and stash prospect for the Clippers who could use more size. The Clippers do pick at 46th tomorrow night. They can use another power forward and another player who can attack the basket, which I think using a power forward is probably the best idea for them at that 46th overall selection. Chomsky is a little bit more of a prospect that's going to be a project, but I think he's worth taking a flyer on considering his upside, protecting the rim, and his shooting upside as well. So I think the Clippers could take him at 46th overall. I would be happy with that pick. Blake Hinson's another guy I wouldn't mind the Clippers taking at 46th. He's a 6'6" power forward, probably a little bit more of a small forward in the NBA. From the University of Pittsburgh, he averaged 18.5 points per game this past season, off 42% shooting from 3. A very underrated talent right now. Definitely an NBA player when I watch him play, and a guy that can play around 14, maybe 15 minutes per game in the NBA, depending on what team he's on. One of the best shooters in the draft, not afraid to let it fly. He should be drafted, in my opinion. And then last up, the last player I want to mention that's underrated is Jamal Shead, a 6-foot point guard from Houston. Showed a ton of heart in March Madness this past season. His tenacious defense is contagious. Definitely was a big part of Houston's success over the last few years. He's definitely going to be a guy that earns around 10 to 12 minutes off the bench as a rookie, depending on his situation, just because of how good his defense is. He shot 31% from three this past season, which he needs to build upon, along with 13 points per game, 6.3 assists, and 2.2 steals per game. Could work a little bit on a shot, but I do think he can build upon that in the NBA. Would not mind to see him be a Clipper. I would love to see him in a Clipper uniform. I think he fits everything that I loved about the Clippers when I first started being a fan of them back in 2021. I loved their tenacity and the way they play defense and the way they hustled for every loose ball and dove for every single rebound and went out of bounds to try to save every single ball that was going to go out. That's what I watch when I watch him play. I see a lot of that on film, see a lot of hustle and a lot of heart. So I would love to see him be a Clipper at 46 tomorrow night. We'll see how things work out, though. As I said, a lot of these picks are going to be off. That's just the way it is with mock drafts. It's really hard to predict, especially in the NBA. The way there's so many trades, it's really hard to predict where guys are going to go. I didn't do any trades in my mock draft just because every single year it gets so messy with trades in the NBA draft. So I didn't really want to add and make it more complex and have trades going from here to there with pick swaps and all these protections 1 through 14 and lottery protections. I didn't really want to do that with this mock draft. So I just had everybody going 1 through 30 where the draft order is at right now. One other guy I want to mention is Quinton Post from BC. He's a guy that's a 7-footer that can space the floor, shoot the three ball well, which you need to do in the NBA, is be able to shoot the three ball as a center in today's game. He's a guy that is going to be picked probably somewhere in the middle to late second round, maybe be an undrafted free agent. But I do think he has a chance to be on a summer league team to compete and have a chance to make an NBA roster. Being a 7-footer that can shoot the three ball and also can score and play some good defense and get some rebounds, you need all those attributes in today's NBA. Watching him play a lot at BC. He's a good kid, plays with a lot of hustle and a lot of heart. Can shoot the three ball well, can space the floor, which, as I've noted now a few times, you need to be able to do that in today's NBA. Would love to see him be drafted tomorrow night. If the Clippers take him at 46, I'd be happy considering I'm a BC fan, a Quinton Post fan, and a Clippers fan. We'll see where he gets drafted tomorrow night. So now I'm going to move on and talk about the Brooklyn Nets, who made 2 trades last night. One of them being Mikal Bridges being traded from the Brooklyn Nets to the New York Knicks. So like Jay-Z said in Empire State of Mind, yeah, I'm about that Brooklyn. Now I'm down to Tribeca. That ends up being the exact journey for Mikal Bridges. He goes from being on the Brooklyn Nets, now being in Manhattan. It was a fun era when he first got to the Brooklyn Nets, when he got traded from the Suns to the Nets for Kevin Durant. But this was the right idea for Brooklyn, starting to rebuild. This is the first trade between the Knicks and the Nets since 1983. I was honestly shocked by this because I've said for a while that Bridges can be a good complementary third option to a winning team, but the Nets weren't really close to contending right now. And I thought the Nets would be better off by trading him. And then they ended up doing it. And I didn't really expect that, which obviously this does signify the Nets are starting a rebuild and starting to hit the reset button, which is the right decision to do. Credit to Joe Tsai and Sean Marks for making this decision. It's not an easy decision to say, yeah, it's time to rebuild. It's not the fun thing to do from a fan base perspective or from a team personnel perspective. But at the end of the day, this was the right decision for Brooklyn. It seems like all Nets fans are glad this team is finally hitting the reset button after the last 5 or 6 years of trying to go all in with Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden, and then having the remnants of those trades still around. Obviously still having Dorian Finney-Smith and Cam Johnson, 2 guys I think they're going to end up trading, but they ended up just trading Mikal Bridges, who was a major piece in those moves when they traded Kevin Durant to the Phoenix Suns. Credit to Joe Tsai, though, and Sean Marks, like I noted. This is the right decision for them, and at the end of the day, it seems like all Nets fans are happy with their decision to rebuild. As I've said over the past year, I've become a Nets fan. They're probably my secondary team right now, just because of how much I've loved that they've gone all in the past. They've come up empty, but at the end of the day, that's what happens when you go all in, and they're not afraid to go all in, and they're obviously not afraid to hit the reset button either, which now they've done now for the second time over the last 10 years. They've hit the reset button a couple times and also went all in a few times as well. 2 to 3 years from now, though, when this team makes top 5 picks in 2025 and 2026, they'll be in a better position. Also, when you add in the fact that Ben Simmons, his contract's going to be up, I believe, after this season. Once he's off the payroll, they're going to be able to have free money and have some cap flexibility to try to go out and star hunt, get some young players, obviously, in the draft over the next couple of years. And they're going to have future draft picks they could potentially trade and try to add to their roster as well. So they have a lot of future to look forward to in Brooklyn. In the deal, the Knicks traded Bojan Bogdanovic 4 unprotected first-round picks in 2025, 2027, 2029, and 2031, a protected 2025 Milwaukee Bucks first-round pick, a 2028 unprotected first-round pick swap, and a 2025 second-round pick for Mikal Bridges and a 2026 Brooklyn Nets second-round pick. This will not be it for the Brooklyn Nets. I expect them to move Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, and try to maybe move Ben Simmons as well. The Nets turned the Kevin Durant trade into an absolute haul. They still have Cam Johnson left with 8 unprotected first-round picks between Phoenix and New York, a protected first-round pick from the Milwaukee Bucks, a 2028 first-round pick swap, a 2028 unprotected first-round pick swap, and 3 second-round picks. That is a great haul considering where they were at when they made this decision to trade Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving over a year ago, and now they're in a much better position to build for the future. This deal with the New York Knicks and the Brooklyn Nets came together fast, according to Ian Begley, who said Bridges told the Nets that he wanted to be a Knick and that he's going to sign with the Knicks in 2 years when he's a free agent, which definitely gave him more leverage in this situation. So now the Knicks have 4 Villanova players who won the national championship together back in 2016. Dante DiVincenzo, Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, and Josh Hart are all teammates in New York on the Knicks. I do like Bridges on the Knicks. I think he fits in well with that lineup, but now it does make Isaiah Hartenstein hard to sign. I'd imagine he's going to walk, and the Knicks are going to try to add a center at the 24th or 25th pick. And then also OG Anunoby. I think you make this trade hoping that OG Anunoby sticks around, so then you have 2 very good role players who could be very good complementary pieces on this roster, considering how good they can be as 3-and-D pieces around Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle, and the rest of the squad they have there. Bridges is a good player, but I think he's more best fit as a third best option, maybe a second option at best, but I think he's probably more of a third option. As for the Nets, this is an excellent trade. 5 first-round picks for Mikal Bridges is a wild, wild trade package. I think the Knicks made an offer that the Nets couldn't refuse at the end of the day. The Nets may have wanted to hold on to Bridges, but when you get offered 5 first-round picks for a guy that's never been an all-star and a guy that said he's going to leave in 2 years, you got to go out, take those draft picks, and start your rebuild. It ends up being the right decision for Brooklyn. As for Bridges, he hasn't missed a game since high school, which makes his durability definitely a major pro of his game. Also good on defense. He's shown flashes. When he was first sent to the Brooklyn Nets, he was a superstar, it looked like, at one point for the first month or two, and then he really faded off towards the end of that season, and obviously this past season struggled shooting the ball. Bridges did want to be a Knick, though, when he was drafted into the NBA. He always wanted to be in New York and play at Madison Square Garden. Now he ends up getting his wish, and now he's alongside his former college teammates, which you never see in the NBA, 4 college teammates that won a national championship all on the same team. As for Joe Shai and Sean Marks, sending James Harden to Philly like he wanted, sending Kevin Durant to Phoenix like he wanted, sending Mikal Bridges to New York like he wanted, it just proves they do take care of their guys that they have on their team. They do their players right in trades. Besides Kyrie Irving, who they traded to the Mavs, and that ended up working out for him. Kyrie did want to be a Laker. They didn't honor that. They ended up sending him to Dallas. But obviously Kyrie and Luka have panned out, making an NBA Finals. But it seems like the Nets do right by their players in trades. So credit to Joe Tsai and Sean Marks. If the Knicks could make that trade, though, for Mikal Bridges, they probably could have made that same trade package and got Donovan Mitchell. Keep in mind, Bridges has never been an all-star. So trading all of those draft picks for him, I think, is a tough decision. Although I think he fits in well with that lineup in New York. And if they end up winning an NBA Finals, no one's going to care about this. But I do think giving up 5 first-round picks for a player that's more fit as a third option, has been a very good role player in his NBA career, I think that's pretty ridiculous, sending 5 first-round picks, especially when it's a Rudy Gobert-like trade. It's very hard when he's never been an all-star, and he's probably not going to be an all-star for the Knicks just because he's not going to be asked to score that many points and do that much in that offense when they have Jalen Brunson and other guys around him. But it's still a good complementary piece. Obviously, the chemistry is going to be great there. As for Sean Marks, I know he's been clowned for a while, but he's done what's best for this franchise now between going all in and rebuilding a few times. I would imagine they're probably going to flip Bogdanovich at some point, and they're probably going to build around Cam Thomas for now, who I think could be an all-star next season. And I know people said that about Jordan Poole when he got traded to the Washington Wizards. I was never that high on Jordan Poole. As for Cam Thomas, I think he can be an all-star on that team. As for what the Nets got from what their trade was for Kevin Durant, they turned Kevin Durant into 9 first-round picks, 2 first-round pick swaps, and Cam Johnson, which is unreal considering they got Mikal Bridges for Kevin Durant and ended up flipping him 4 more picks. So overall, have 9 first-round picks to show for. One of them was already drafted in Noah Clowney. 2 first-round pick swaps and Cam Johnson left from that Kevin Durant trade, which is an unbelievable haul. So credit to Sean Marks for figuring things out. That's very Sam Presti-like, taking players, turning them into draft picks, and then turning them into even more draft picks in the future. We'll see how things work out for the Nets. It seems like they had a little bit of buyer's remorse, though. They just made a trade last night with the Houston Rockets. So in this move, the Nets got their 2025 first-round pick swap back from Houston, and they also got their unprotected 2026 first-round pick back from the Houston Rockets. The Nets did this because they know they're going to struggle the next couple years, and they value their own picks and control of their own future over the unknown future of the Phoenix Suns. The Rockets still have the Nets picks in 2027 and 2029 through first-round pick swaps. As for the Rockets, what they got in this deal, they got the Suns first-round pick swap in 2025. They got the Suns' unprotected first-round pick in 2027, and then also got a first-round pick in 2029 via either the Mavericks or the Suns, and then also got a 2029 first-round pick swap, and that's either between the Suns or the Mavericks. Houston did this with the hope of trying to go out and get Kevin Durant from the Phoenix Suns. The Phoenix Suns have said they're going to try to run back this team. It seems like that's what their intention is to run back this team, especially considering they gave Mike Budenholzer all that money to be the head coach. It doesn't seem like they're going to go out and just rebuild right away. So it seems like they're going to try to run back this team. But if they don't, the Houston Rockets did this with the idea in mind that they could go to the Phoenix Suns and offer them all of their first-round picks back and control of their future again, which is something they may do if they do decide to trade Kevin Durant or Devin Booker. They're probably going to want their picks back, just like Brooklyn valued their own picks over Phoenix's picks. The Phoenix Suns are going to want their picks back just to have control of their own future again. As for the Brooklyn Nets, they now have 14 first-round picks over the next 7 years. They're in full rebuild mode, which, as I've said now a million times, is the right idea. There's going to be growing pains, but I do think things are going to work out for this Brooklyn Nets team. As for Houston, they're big name hunting. They're trying to go out and get Kevin Durant or Devin Booker, which I don't really think adding Kevin Durant is going to really be a major factor for that team. Yes, they probably go out and make the playoffs. Kevin Durant is still a great player, but considering the ages of those players on that team and the fact that they may have to trade Alperen Sengun in this trade as well, that just makes me think it's probably best for them just to hold their draft picks right now, hold the Phoenix Suns draft picks and see what goes on in the future. Kevin Durant is one of the most gifted players to ever play the NBA, one of the best offensive players to ever play the game of basketball, and for sure a top 10 to 15 player of all time. But if you look at this Houston Rockets team, I don't think adding him necessarily makes them a contender in the West. We'll see how things work out. And then lastly, for the New York Knicks, they get a great complementary piece to that lineup, but the price was obviously a heavy overpay for Mikal Bridges. They end up getting their guy, though, a guy they wanted, but I think they could have went out and traded that package for an even better player with all of those draft picks. But as I've said in previous podcast episodes, I thought the Knicks would be very, very vigilant this offseason and try to go out and get a very, very good player on the market, considering they had all of their draft picks for the immediate future and beyond, and they end up going out and getting Mikal Bridges. We'll see what happens with the OG Anunoby situation. But as I've said, I think it's a major overpay, but I do think he does fit that piece in that lineup very well next to the guys that obviously he played a lot with in college. As for the LA Clippers, which this is the last thing I'm going to mention, Paul George has reportedly been offered potentially a max deal from the Golden State Warriors, and he has until Saturday to opt into his 1-year, $48 million option with the LA Clippers. As I've noted now a million times this offseason, as much as I think the Clippers should try to re-sign Paul George and James Harden just to try to be able to trade them if they want to try to have some of their future back, considering everything they traded for both of those guys, you want to at least try to get some things back in return. You don't want those guys to walk for free. As much as I know that, and as much as I've said that during the offseason, I think James Harden's going to stay with the Clippers. I do think, though, Paul George is going to end up leaving, whether it's a sign and trade and he opts in, or he ends up opting out and being a free agent. I do think Paul George ends up leaving the LA Clippers. I think as of right now, an opt-in, then maybe doing a sign and trade, getting the max deal that he wants from the Clippers, and then being traded to, let's say, the Golden State Warriors or the Philadelphia 76ers. I think that still makes sense for Paul George. As for the LA Clippers, if they could go out and try to get something back in return and not let him walk for free, that's an ideal situation. I think their goal is still to try to get him back on a deal that's lesser than the max deal that he wants. If Paul George wants that max deal, it's probably not going to be for the Clippers, especially considering now they've had 2 months during the offseason and all of this past season to try to figure out a max deal or at least an extension to some degree, and they've never been able to come to a consensus. I've read a lot that maybe the Clippers are thinking Paul George is just bluffing and he doesn't want to leave, and he ends up wanting to stay in LA anyways. And maybe they think that's a way they can try to use some leverage on him and try to get him back for a cheaper deal. But as of right now, I think Paul George ends up leaving the LA Clippers. As tough as it is to say, and I know I won't be happy when he ends up leaving if he does end up leaving, I do acknowledge it's a reality that he ends up probably leaving the way things currently stand. He wants his money, wants one more max deal before the end of his career, which he probably could get a 4-year deal right now from the Golden State Warriors at max money, and that ends up being the case. The Clippers don't want to give him that year, that 4 years, that fourth year. I think they've offered him around 3 years, and he wants that fourth year with more money. So I think he ends up being traded, unfortunately. We'll see how things do work out. He has until Saturday. I don't think the Mikal Bridges trade is going to be the only trade we see in the NBA over the next 48 to 72 hours or so. I think Paul George could end up being traded. Who knows about Lonzo Ball? And then also Zach LaVine. There's a lot that could go on in the NBA over the next 72 to 96 hours. Maybe even Darius Garland could be traded. There's a lot that can happen in the near future in the NBA. And as I've noted now multiple times, I think the Paul George situation is going to end up being over with within the next couple of days. We'll see what the Clippers do get in return if they do end up doing a sign and trade with them. If they can go out and try to sign and trade him, to the Golden State Warriors. If we can get Jonathan Kuminga back in return, I'd be very, very happy with that return, considering the Clippers do need a power forward in their lineup. If they do end up deciding to keep Paul George and James Harden around, I think they do need to go and get a number 4 for this lineup. So then you can have James Harden at the 1, Paul George at the 2, Kawhi Leonard at the 3, and then have somebody at the 4 and Ivica Zubac at the 5. I think that ends up being the best lineup for the Clippers, since I don't think Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are best fit to play the 4 anymore at this stage in their career. I know that's the way the NBA is trending, is you have a small ball 4, but I think the Clippers would be in a better position if they had a legitimate power forward in their lineup. Obviously, the Clippers were the best team in the NBA in December and January, 26-5 run over a 31-game stretch. When they figured things out, they were great. The formula was working. We'll see if they do end up running it back. I wouldn't be mad if they run it back, considering I do want the Clippers to at least have some control over their future. You don't want James Harden and Paul George just to leave for free. And also, when those guys do stick around, if they do stick around, you do have the ability to win the NBA Finals with all of the talent that those guys bring to the game. So we'll see how things do work out. That's my thoughts on the situation. As I've noted, I do think Paul George ends up leaving, but I'd love to see him stick around in LA. We'll see how things work out. Anyways, that'll wrap up this episode. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to this. As always, I appreciate it. I hope you guys have a good one, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you.